It's Monday, January 20th, 2025. Trump's comeback is mere hours away from total completion. The drama over TikTok and more warnings California ignored. Next on the AM Update.
At noon, the curtain closes on 4 long years of American decline.
11 million people pouring into our country in the last 4 years. If that was a state, that would be a larger population than 42 of our states.
This isn't kindergarten. Y'all matriculated from kindergarten a long time ago. Or at least that's what it says because y'all have bar license.
You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine. And he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order 3 weeks ago.
Donald Trump held one final rally inside Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. yesterday, where he greeted a crowd of really energetic supporters and had these words of encouragement and optimism.
Tomorrow at noon, the curtain closes on 4 long years of American decline. And we begin a brand new day of American strength and prosperity, dignity and pride.
Trump also announced that later on today, he is going to be signing not 100, but around 200 executive orders.
Somebody said yesterday, sir, don't sign so many in one day. Let's do it over a period of weeks. I said, like hell, we're going to do it over weeks. We're going to sign them at the beginning.
Among those executive orders is declaring an emergency at the southern border and issuing a proclamation closing the border, designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. He's going to be reinstating Remain in Mexico and ending catch and release. He's going to direct the military to construct a new phase of the border wall, return federal workers to in-person work, pause all offshore wind leases and DEI hiring, and a bevy, dozens, hundreds of executive orders. Again, that's going to be the most immediate impact of the Trump administration. Are these executive orders, of course, what remains to be seen is what he and Republicans in Congress can accomplish permanently, hopefully, legislatively. Now, you've heard that they moved his inauguration ceremonies indoors inside the Capitol Rotunda because of this bitterly cold weather that's coming through the nation's capital. Of course, wink, wink, nod, nod. We all know what the true reason is. They're worried about having an outdoor celebration. And yeah, they set up all of the bleachers, all of the seating outside the Capitol building. But I have to think just kind of at the last minute, basically, moving them indoors, they've got to have some sort of credible threat, I would think, to do that, because it's not that cold in Washington, D.C. So again, that's actually happening. Again, today's inauguration, Donald Trump will complete it's the most historic comeback politically in probably United States history. He's completing that later today. The inauguration starts at noon Eastern time. The Supreme Court on Friday unanimously upheld a law requiring TikTok's China-based parent company to divest from the app, teeing up a ban that took effect on Saturday night, only to be revoked on Sunday. The justices sided with the Biden administration, finding the divest or ban law does not violate the First Amendment, and the ruling just came 3 days before Trump was set to take office. Trump reiterated his support for TikTok over the weekend. Nevertheless, TikTok, its parent company ByteDance, shut the app down late on Saturday night, but did it with the message that said, "We are thankful for President Donald Trump's indication that he's going to work with us to find a solution to reinstate TikTok." All 170 million TikTok users, if they were on the app on Saturday night, got that message explicitly thanking Donald Trump for promising to bring the app back. Then on Sunday morning, Donald Trump issued a statement on Truth Social saying, "Save TikTok," and then TikTok reinstated the app on Sunday, saying, "Thank you, President Trump." So again, politically, this is at least a short-term big win for Donald Trump. What really happened here? I'm going to get into that later in Air Analysis. By the way, Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank, really successful businessman, he offered $20 billion in cash to buy TikTok. $20 billion in cash to buy TikTok. Now, I don't think anybody bothered to tell him that the app is actually free on the App Store, but also the app is not worth that. It's worth a heck of a lot more than that. And that's part and maybe tangentially one of the reasons why this is even a story. Again, more on that in Air Analysis. Southern Californians are bracing for gusty winds and a heightened risk of wildfires less than 2 weeks after the outbreak of deadly blazes that have killed at least 27 people and charred thousands of homes. The National Weather Service has issued a warning of particularly dangerous situations for part of Los Angeles and Ventura counties on Monday afternoon through Tuesday morning due to low humidity and damaging Santa Ana winds. Gusts could peak at 70 miles per hour along the coast and 100 miles per hour in the mountains and foothills. Windy weather and single-digit humidity are expected to linger through Thursday, according to Rich Thompson, a meteorologist for the National Weather Service. He said the fire risk is also elevated because the region hasn't seen rain since April. Los Angeles' budget priorities continue to face scrutiny over cuts to the Los Angeles Fire Department after several people warned officials ahead of the ongoing Southern California wildfires that cuts to the department could have devastating consequences. Mayor Karen Bass slashed the fire department's budget by over $17 million last year, a move that's since drawn intense criticism. In May of last year, LAFD Chief Kristen Crowley warned that we're past the breaking point where firefighters can no longer do more with less. Crowley went on the record pleading for funding, this was last year, to hire more firefighters. Data shows the LAFD is woefully understaffed compared to other major cities with less than one firefighter per 1,000 residents. The recommended level is 2.5 firefighters per 1,000 residents. So that LAFD fire chief, she said, she was saying last year, May of last year, pleading for more funding, and those pleadings went unheard and unacted upon. We have a couple of Senate appointments. Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio has picked Lieutenant Governor John Husted to fill J.D. Vance's vacant Senate seat. I don't know about Lieutenant Governor Husted too much. I've heard, again, this is Mike DeWine. I do have an idea who he is. Not exactly an impressive governor, so I'm not really expecting impressive picks from him, but we'll see how he does in the Senate. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has picked Ashley Moody, that's state's attorney general, to the U.S. Senate to fill the vacant Senate seat of Marco Rubio, who will become Secretary of State. It's been widely expected in recent weeks that Moody would be the pick, while others, including Representatives Kat Kamak and Corey Mills, did talk to DeSantis about the position. DeSantis said publicly he had reservations about appointing a member of the House because of the GOP's slim majority there. State Senator Jay Collins, who served as a Green Beret, also got considerable support from conservatives who wanted DeSantis to pick a military veteran. But ultimately, the seat will go to Moody, a 49-year-old who easily won her first election in 2018 to become Attorney General and her re-election bid in 2022. She was unable to run again because of term limits. Here she is just last week, talking about one of her passions, which is immigration and getting illegal immigration under control.
Immigration, and you can use whatever number you want. I've heard 11 million to 20 million over the last 4 years. Let's take the 11 million number. 11 million people pouring into our country in the last 4 years. If that was a state, that would be a larger population than 42 of our states. That's just people. The amount of fentanyl that flooded into our country killed 500,000 Americans just in the last 4 years.
That is Ashley Moody. She is Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida's pick to fill Marco Rubio's now vacant Senate seat. She will be assuming office, I heard, maybe even later today for that Florida Senate seat. All right, coming up, it might be one of the biggest political scandals of all time. CNN gets absolutely mogged. And more on TikTok, what I think actually happened there, or at least tangentially to what happened. That's next.
Case number 22-608CA, Zachary Young, plaintiff versus Cable News Network, Inc., defendant. Verdict form number 1. Do you find by the greater weight of the evidence that defendant CNN committed defamation per se against plaintiff Zachary Young? Yes.
On Friday, a Florida jury found CNN liable for defamation against Navy veteran Zachary Young. Young's lawsuit against the network cited a November 2021 report by CNN's chief national security correspondent Alex Marquardt. Quote, in our world today, the U.S. government, the Biden administration says that as of last week, it had assisted in the departure of at least 377 U.S. citizens and 279 lawful permanent residents of the U.S. from Afghanistan since August 31st. Still, many Afghans who desperately wanted to flee Taliban rule, and Afghans who say their lives are at stake, they remain behind. As CNN's Alex Marquette has discovered, Afghans trying to get out of the country face a black market full of promises, demands, exorbitant fees, and no guarantee of safety or success. Marquardt claimed that Young was one of the individuals exploiting the quote-unquote desperate Afghans. The segment ran on 11 CNN shows, including Jake Tapper's and Jim Acosta's. CNN argued that sections of the report contained opinions. Quote, at the time of its reporting, CNN knew little about Young's financials, his model, or whether he'd successfully evacuated, because whenever anyone, including CNN, asked Young to explain his business, he obfuscated, behaved unprofessionally, lied, and hid. Devin Friedman, Young's lawyer, contended that his client's, quote, ability to walk into a room with pride and being seen as professional with integrity has been stripped away as a result of CNN's reporting. These are injuries that transcend monetary loss. They pierce the soul of who he is. On Friday, 6 Florida jurors determined that Young was entitled to $4 million in economic damages, $1 million in emotional damages, and additional punitive damages, which has not yet been determined. I cannot think of another network so deserving of an outcome such as this. The judge in this case, that would be William Henry, absolutely excoriated the lawyers for CNN. Here he is comparing them to kindergartners.
This isn't kindergarten. Y'all matriculated from kindergarten a long, long, long time ago. Or at least that's what it says, because y'all have bar licenses.
Now, that was in reaction to CNN's lawyers trying, at the very last minute with this case, trying to enter into evidence a lot of different items, and that is seen, at least by the judge, as being unethical or immature, trying to just ram through a bunch of evidence at the last minute, not communicating with the opposing attorneys. I've very rarely heard excoriations from judges in law rooms or in courts like this. But man, I think CNN maybe might want to find new legal counsel after that. Coming up next, Donald Trump just announced a special envoy to a foreign country. And is this the biggest political scandal of the last 4 years? Next. Trump has announced he's appointing Jon Voight, Mel Gibson, and Sylvester Stallone as special ambassadors to Hollywood, California. He posted on Truth Social late last week, "It's my honor to announce the aforementioned names to be special ambassadors to a great but very troubled place, Hollywood, California. They'll serve as special envoys to me for the purpose of bringing Hollywood, which has lost so much business over the last 4 years to foreign countries, back bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. These 3 very talented people will be my eyes and ears, and I will get done what they suggest. It will be like the United States of America itself, the golden age of Hollywood." This might be one of the most important foreign ambassadorships, Hollywood, California. Going to be headed up by Jon Voight, Mel Gibson, and Sylvester Stallone. And now here's this. Is this the biggest scandal coming out of the Biden administration over the past 4 years? Listen to this. This is House Speaker Mike Johnson talking to the Free Press about what indeed the Biden administration was hiding.
I do stand by it, and I say this without any personal animus at all. I mean, in some ways, I actually kind of feel sorry for Joe Biden. I mean, he's in the twilight years of his life. He is not, obviously, has not been in charge for some time. And I know this by personal observation, and now the whole world knows it. And it's been very, very concerning to me over the last, year and a half since I've had this position.
Can you tell us a story when you say personal observation? What kind
well,
of thing did you see?
It's public now because the Wall Street Journal got it and put it on the front page. But January a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I had been asked, I became Speaker in October 2023, and there were all sorts of big national security concerns and everything going on, and I started requesting a meeting with the President because, I'm kind of old school. I'm a constitutional law guy. Speaker of the House should be able to talk to the President, especially in times of great national interest and calamity. But they wouldn't let me meet with him, and his staff kept giving me excuses. This went on for like 8 or 9 weeks. "I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have time." What are you talking about? I'm second in line of the presidency. He has time. I need to talk to him. We had, I can't say the classified parts, but we had some big national concerns at the time that I was losing sleep over. Finally, I just went to the Hill Press Corps and I said, the President is not being allowed to meet with the Speaker. There's a problem. So they started putting pressure on him. Long story short, they finally relented. They invited me to the White House. I show up and I realize it's actually an ambush because it's not just me and the President. It's also Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem, the CIA director, everybody. And then, so I walked in the Oval and, I know what this is. They're going to hotbox the speaker on Ukraine funding. That's what it was. This is probably third week of January. We sit down, we're in the midst of it, and the whole conversation, and I'm going, we don't need to have this conversation. The president reaches over just like this. We're sitting right next to the fireplace in the Oval, and he grabs my arm and he says, "The speaker and I just need a couple minutes together. Would y'all just leave us alone?" And I looked up on the faces of some of the staff standing around the wall, and they're like, "Oh, no, he did it." So he called it. He's the commander-in-chief. So everybody leaves, and he and I are standing awkwardly in the middle of the Oval Office, right over the rug by that coffee table. And I said, "Mr. President, thanks for the moments. This is very important. I got some big national security things I need to talk to you about that I've heard, and I think you know, and what do we do? But first, real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? I cannot answer this from my constituents in Louisiana. Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, And he looks at me stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, "Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order 3 weeks ago." And he goes, "No, I didn't do that." And he's arguing with me. I said, "Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that." And he goes, "Oh, you talk about natural gas." "Yes, sir." He said, No, you misunderstand. He said, "What I did is I signed this thing we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG." I said, "No, you're not, sir. You paused it. I know. I have the export terminals in my state. I talked to those people this morning. This is doing massive damage to our economy, national security." It occurred to me, Barry, he was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed. And I walked out of that meeting with fear and loathing because I thought, we're in serious trouble. Who is running the country? I don't know who put the paper in front of him, but he didn't know.
That is incredible. That's House Speaker Mike Johnson talking about that meeting that you just heard about with Joe Biden, where Mike Johnson realized that Joe Biden really isn't the one running the show over at 1600 Pennsylvania Ave. Now, number one, in some parts of that clip, you can actually hear the Louisiana coming out from Mike Johnson. You can kind of hear he actually has a Louisiana accent when he's impersonating somebody else. That's not very important, though. Number two, it would have been nice if somebody with Mike Johnson's pulpit and power, could have said this back then when it actually mattered. But he's not the only one. He's not the only one at fault here. Bah! Drat! Again! If only there was some institution, some estate, if you will, that could have asked questions that would have begged answers like we just heard from Mike Johnson. If there was there were people who kept a record of public government interest and asked really hard questions of those in power. Oh man. If there was a fourth estate or something like that could have asked these questions when it mattered, and so that we didn't have to hear these testimonies when it doesn't matter after Joe Biden has left office. Man, if only such an organization like that existed. I guess maybe I'm being too hard on the media. It wasn't at all obvious at any point over the last 4 years that Joe Biden was suffering from any sort of mental decline, end of quote. And finally, our analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I think what's going on with TikTok, there's more than meets the eye here. This was never fundamentally about national security, at least not with the timing. Because here's what I think this really is. It's a win-win for the censors in the swamp as well as Silicon Valley. Swamp censors get their instruments of censorship closer to home by banning TikTok. Closer to home means easier to control. Silicon Valley loses competition. This whole fight kicked off into high gear when YouTube introduced Shorts, which are, again, vertical scrollable video, and Instagram Reels, vertical scrollable video. Those two things were just kind of getting going. So again, I think this is really a win-win for the censors in the swamp as well as Silicon Valley. So maybe this is not the primary thing that's going on here, but it's definitely part of this. Because Kevin O'Leary, $20 billion sounds like a lot of money. There's 170 million users on TikTok. $20 billion for a platform like that is pennies on the dollars, if that. So again, this thing passed, this bill that bans TikTok. And again, Donald Trump has promised an executive order granting a stay for 90 days. It sounds like he can't really constitutionally do that, so that's going to be a court fight. I'm not really sure. I mean, he definitely likes this political win. I mean, this makes him look great with young people because 170 million people saw that message, two different messages from TikTok over the weekend, thanking Donald Trump for saving the app. So I don't know what's going to happen with this. But again, it was broad bipartisan support that passed this bill. When it went through the House, I think it was the House Intel Committee, or maybe it was the Senate Intel Committee, whichever one. After it came out of there, it passed that committee 50-0. So that's not nothing. Maybe there is some legit national security threats. Is it unique? I don't know. But at this point, you should just assume, for the most part, you're being played when any bill having any tangential relationship with free speech passes with bipartisan support. Now, there's also this possibility. So I think this was just a win-win for Silicon Valley and DC swamp censors. I think that's at least some part of what was going on here. There's also this. If you were running just an impeccable social engineering scheme, I don't think you do it any differently than what TikTok did over the weekend. You say, oh, we're going away, but there's hope on the horizon with Donald Trump. You actually take the app away. Some dude in Wisconsin tries to burn down his Republican congressman's office. He gets so upset that TikTok disappeared from his phone on Saturday night. And then the very next Sunday morning, hey, we're back. Thank you, Donald Trump. Thank you very much for bringing back, is for saving the app. See, Donald Trump gets the political win that he wants. Beijing gets the social engineering, that this was going to be inevitable. There's nothing we can do, but there might be hope on the horizon. And everybody's happy again, including Beijing. I don't know. Something fishy with the way this went down this weekend definitely exists. It stinks. So, again, more to the story. At the bottom line is this law that bans TikTok passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. It got a 9-0 victory at the Supreme Court to ban it on national security grounds. I'm not totally sure without a complete divestment from ByteDance for TikTok. I don't know how this law doesn't eventually go fully into effect. I do think it should be banned. I just don't think we, as a general rule, should let foreign companies just have carte blanche First Amendment rights. No, you don't. You're a foreign company. At the same time, this was all handled kind of poorly. The time to ban this app was probably like 6 years ago when it didn't have 170 million users. Anyway, just a few thoughts on what's really going on with TikTok. We'll be back at it again tomorrow. Happy Inauguration Day. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.